The studio lights glared softly against the polished desk as Barack Obama leaned forward, his voice steady, his expression calm yet charged with intent. Viewers had grown used to his composed delivery, that familiar rhythm of carefully chosen words. But this time there was something different, something sharper hiding beneath the smoothness. When the topic shifted toward Donald Trump's policies on immigration, Obama did not hesitate. He turned the conversation in a way that caught everyone off guard. He spoke of Melania Trump, of her journey as an immigrant, and the quiet irony of Trump's fierce stance against the very system that had allowed his wife to build a life in America. He didn't raise his tone. There was no need for theatrics. His statement landed precisely because of how measured it was. He mentioned her story, the details most already knew but rarely heard, discussed so bluntly on live television. For years, Melania's background had been treated as a side note, something that floated in the public domain but was carefully protected from scrutiny. Obama, however, brought it forward deliberately, almost surgically, as if to lay bare a contradiction that had been overlooked for too long. The words were not cruel, nor were they laced with mockery. They were factual, but their weight carried a sting. The audience reaction was immediate, though silent. Social media erupted within minutes, but in that studio, there was only the heavy pause after Obama's remark. It was the kind of pause that says more than noise ever could. Everyone knew that mentioning Melania in this context was bound to spark fire. For Trump, this was not politics, it was personal. The irony of his wife's immigrant past, being used to challenge his policies, struck directly at the core of his narrative. As Obama continued speaking, he wove the point deeper. He framed it not as an attack on Melania herself, but as a reflection of Trump's own contradictions. Here was a man, Obama suggested, who championed walls, bans, and restrictions with unrelenting force, yet built his life alongside a woman whose story was shaped by the very system he sought to dismantle. The framing was almost elegant in its simplicity. It wasn't sensational, it was surgical, and that precision made it all the more shocking. Trump's face was visible on the split screen, and in that moment, millions of viewers saw the unmistakable shift. The narrowing eyes, the pursed lips, the twitch of agitation, all subtle tells before the storm. Obama wasn't shouting, but Trump's silence said more than words could. For a man who thrived on dominating the narrative, having the focus turned toward his wife in this context was intolerable, and Obama knew exactly what he was doing. For years, the rivalry between them had been fueled by policy disputes, public spats, and mutual contempt. But this move by Obama crossed into unfamiliar ground. He wasn't simply attacking Trump's leadership or his record. He was holding up a mirror and forcing Trump to see the inconsistency in his own life. To Obama, it seemed like a statement of truth. To Trump, it was an ambush. The reaction from viewers was explosive. Hashtags began trending, clips circulated endlessly, and commentators rushed to frame the moment. Some praised Obama for speaking plainly, for daring to touch on the very contradiction that many had whispered about but few had addressed openly. Others criticized him for dragging Melania into the spotlight, arguing that she had deliberately stayed out of political battles and should not be made a target. Still, the underlying message of Obama's comment lingered. It wasn't just about Melania, it was about Trump's narrative, his political brand, and the uncomfortable reality that the foundation of his personal life clashed so sharply with his public policies. Obama had exposed that contradiction in the most public way possible, and he had done it without raising his voice or breaking his composure. For those who had watched the rivalry between the two men unfold over the years, this was a new level of confrontation. It wasn't about name-calling or partisan divides. It was about drawing attention to the cracks in Trump's image, using truth itself as the weapon. And in that moment, live on television, Obama managed to strike a nerve that cut deeper than any campaign slogan or political ad could ever reach. The silence that followed Obama's words lasted only a fraction of a second, but it felt like the entire studio held its breath. Then, almost on cue, Donald Trump erupted. His voice boomed across the set, louder than it needed to be, as though sheer volume could drown out what had just been said. His hand shot out, pointing directly at the camera as though Obama were sitting right there on the other side of the lens. The anger in his eyes wasn't the kind crafted for rallies, or the kind rehearsed for political theater. This was different. It was sharp, raw, and deeply personal. How dare he? Trump barked, his tone rising with every word. The energy around him shifted instantly, from a simmering frustration to a full-blown outburst. He didn't pace himself, didn't hold back. He launched into a tirade, defending Melania with the kind of ferocity that revealed just how much the comment had pierced. The immigration issue had always been one of Trump's strongest talking points, the backbone of his brand, but when it was tied to his wife, the fire inside him burned hotter than ever. He slammed Obama for crossing a line, accusing him of dragging family into what should have remained a political discussion. Trump's words spilled out with force, layered with indignation. "You don't talk about my wife," he thundered, repeating it like a mantra, each time, louder than the last. His usual bravado was there, the raised eyebrows, the hand gestures, the booming certainty, but it was mixed with something heavier, something closer to fury than showmanship. Asterisk viewers had seen Trump angry before. They had seen him insult opponents, lash out at reporters, and dominate rallies with his signature aggression. But this moment was unique because it stripped away the calculated edge. This wasn't anger wielded as a tool. It was anger that had slipped the leash. Obama's calm delivery had been the spark, and now the fire was raging. Trump's face reddened as he continued, insisting that Obama's comments were an attack not just on Melania, but on him as a husband, a man, and a leader. Asterisk the hosts tried to interject, to steer the conversation back to policy or soften the temperature in the room, but Trump refused to yield. Every attempt to redirect only fueled his defiance. He wasn't going to let it go. The more he spoke, the clearer it became that this wasn't about optics or strategy, it was about pride and protection. His wife had been mentioned. Her past had been scrutinized in front of millions. And for Trump, that was unforgivable. Asterisk as his words rolled on, the air in the studio thickened. He accused Obama of being obsessed with tearing him down, of going too far in a desperate attempt to stay relevant. He claimed that real leaders knew where to draw the line, and Obama had crossed it. He painted himself as the victim of a personal smear, one that ignored the dignity of his family. For a man who so often presented himself as untouchable, this display of rage revealed just how vulnerable he felt when the spotlight shifted to Melania. Asterisk outside the studio, reaction was immediate. Clips of Trump's outburst spread within minutes, igniting debates across networks and social platforms. Some sympathized with him, arguing that family should be off limits, that no matter the politics, a spouse who chose not to engage should not be thrust into the fire. Others criticized him, pointing out that he had often dragged other people's families into the spotlight when it suited his arguments, and that his fury now was less about principle and more about hypocrisy. Asterisk yet, no matter which side viewers took, the power of the moment was undeniable. Obama's.com remark had triggered something in Trump that few had seen in such raw form. He wasn't playing to the crowd or crafting a soundbite. He was visibly shaken, visibly furious. And in politics, moments like that carry weight. They reveal what strikes deepest, what rattles even the most confident figure. Asterisk for Trump. This wasn't just another TV spat. It was a line drawn in the sand. Obama had touched a nerve that went beyond politics, and Trump's eruption was proof of how fiercely he guarded that line. Millions watched as he made it clear. Criticize his policies, attack his presidency, mock his rallies if you must, but bring Melania into it, and you unleash a side of him that refuses to back down. The clip didn't take long to travel. Within minutes of the exchange, social media timelines filled with the replay of Obama's remark and Trump's explosive response. News outlets cut their regular programming to show the heated moment, and hashtags began trending almost instantly. The public reaction was swift and divided, with opinions breaking down along sharp lines. What was meant to be just another live debate turned into a cultural flashpoint that no one could ignore. Asterisk for some, Obama's words were seen as a bold, truth-telling moment. Supporters praised him for daring to point out the glaring contradiction between Trump's strict immigration rhetoric and his marriage to Melania, a woman whose own journey began as an immigrant. They argued that this wasn't an attack on her personally, but a challenge to Trump's consistency, the very foundation of his policies. He just said what everyone was thinking, one commentator remarked, as clips of Obama's calm delivery circulated with captions hailing him as courageous for putting the issue on the table. Asterisk but on the other side, the reaction was just as strong if not stronger. Critics accused Obama of crossing an unspoken boundary, dragging Melania into a political battle she had largely avoided. Many pointed out that she had intentionally stayed away from political controversies, rarely speaking out or engaging in debates. To them, this was a cheap shot, a way to score points by invoking someone who never volunteered to be part of the fight. Trump's furious reaction, they argued, was not only predictable but justified. Family, in their view, should remain off limits. Asterisk the split in perception played out everywhere, from television panels, to dinner tables, to online forums. Some saw Obama as exposing hypocrisy, others saw him as lowering the tone of discourse. And hovering over it all was Trump, whose explosive defense of his wife became just as much a talking point as the original remark. His visible anger was dissected frame by frame, with analysts debating whether it was a sign of genuine outrage or a calculated attempt to rally his base. Asterisk cable news ran endless loops of the outburst, inviting guests to weigh in. One strategist suggested that Obama's move was deliberate, designed to provoke exactly the reaction Trump delivered. By touching on Melania, he forced Trump into a defensive stance, pulling him away from his usual talking points and leaving him exposed in raw emotion. Another analyst argued the opposite, that Obama miscalculated, underestimating how personal and volatile Trump's response would be, and in doing so, risked making himself look like the aggressor. Asterisk the reaction on social media painted an even starker picture. Memes emerged within hours, some mocking Trump's fury, others condemning Obama for what they called a low blow. Hashtags supporting both sides trended simultaneously, creating a digital battlefield where neither man's reputation was left untouched. Supporters of Trump praised him for standing up for Melania, framing it as a rare glimpse of him as a husband rather than just a political figure. Critics, however, accused him of hypocrisy, noting that he had often shown no hesitation in dragging other politicians' families into public ridicule when it suited him. Asterisk, as the debate raged on, what became clear was that the clash had touched a nerve beyond the two men themselves. It wasn't just about Obama's comment or Trump's reaction. It was about the larger question of where the boundaries lie in political discourse. Was it fair game to highlight the personal contradictions of a public figure, even if that meant mentioning their spouse? Or should family remain entirely outside the realm of debate, regardless of the context? The public couldn't seem to agree. Asterisk, Trump himself didn't let the moment fade. In the hours and days that followed, he returned to the incident repeatedly, bringing it up during interviews, rallies, and social media posts. Each time, he framed it as evidence that Obama was desperate, unfair, and willing to cross moral lines. His supporters echoed this sentiment, using it to rally around him with renewed intensity. What began as a sharp exchange on live television quickly evolved into a wider cultural conversation about respect, hypocrisy, and the messy overlap between public politics and private life. Asterisk, in the end, the public reaction became as much a part of the story as the confrontation itself. Obama had spoken calmly, Trump had erupted, and the nation had split once again into camps, each seeing in the moment exactly what they wanted to see. It was no longer just about immigration or Melania, it was about values, about lines that should or shouldn't be crossed, and about how two men with a history of rivalry managed to spark one of the most viral political debates of the year. The clash between the two men didn't just create a storm for a single news cycle. It opened a wound that revealed just how fragile the line between politics and personal life could be. For years, Donald Trump and Barack Obama had been locked in a rivalry that seemed endless, each exchange sharpening their divide. But this moment felt different. It wasn't about tax policy, healthcare, or foreign relations. It was about family, identity, and the collision of private history with public politics. Asterisk, Obama's calm remark about Melania's immigrant past was more than a passing observation. It was a reminder of the contradictions that shaped Trump's political brand. Trump had built so much of his reputation on hardline immigration policies, pushing for walls, bans, and restrictions, presenting himself as the ultimate defender of America's borders. Yet, as Obama pointed out with surgical precision, Trump's personal life told a different story. He was married to a woman who had walked the immigrant path, someone whose very presence in the country mirrored the experiences of those Trump so often vilified. The tension between these two truths had always been there, but it had rarely been thrust into the spotlight so openly. Asterisk, Trump's furious reaction showed just how deeply that tension cut. In defending his wife, he was not just shielding her from scrutiny, he was trying to preserve the image he had so carefully constructed. His political persona thrived on strength, dominance, and consistency. To have someone as influential as Obama expose a crack in that image, and to do it on live television, threatened the foundation of Trump's narrative. For him, it wasn't only a personal insult, it was a political threat. Asterisk, what made the moment even more impactful was how it blurred the boundaries of acceptable discourse. In politics, there has long been an unspoken rule that spouses and children should remain off limits. Obama's decision to invoke Melania's name in such a direct way challenged that boundary, forcing the public to confront an uncomfortable question: were personal contradictions fair game in a political arena, or had he crossed a line that risked undermining his own credibility? Asterisk, for many viewers, the clash became a mirror reflecting their own values. Those critical of Trump saw Obama's comment as a bold act of accountability, a way of reminding the public that Trump's positions were riddled with hypocrisy. They argued that if Trump was willing to use immigration as the cornerstone of his platform, then his own life should be open to scrutiny. Others, however, saw the moment as evidence of politics sinking into something uglier. They believed that bringing Melania into the conversation cheapened the debate, dragging someone who had deliberately kept her distance from politics into a fight she never asked to join. Asterisk, the impact went beyond the individuals involved. It reignited broader debates about immigration itself, reminding the nation of how divisive the issue had become. Trump's hardline policies had always been framed as protecting American identity, but Obama's point exposed the complexity of what that identity truly meant. Could America celebrate the immigrant story when it came to someone like Melania, while vilifying it in the case of others? The contradiction sat at the heart of the exchange, and it refused to be ignored. Asterisk, Trump leaned into the moment, using it as fuel for his own narrative. He cast himself as a husband defending his wife from unfair attacks, framing Obama as a man willing to go too far just to score political points. His supporters rallied around him, applauding his defiance and praising his anger as righteous. But his critics saw the outburst differently, interpreting it as evidence of just how vulnerable he became when the spotlight shifted away from his control. Asterisk, in the weeks that followed, the confrontation lingered. Commentators returned to it repeatedly, using it as a symbol of the broader divide between the two men and the country they represented. For Trump, it became proof that his enemies would stop at nothing. For Obama, it was a calculated move to expose hypocrisy. For the public, it was a reminder that in modern politics, the personal and the political are no longer separate. They collide, intertwine, and explode in moments like this. Asterisk, by the time the dust began to settle, one thing was clear. This was not just another clash in the long rivalry between Trump and Obama. It was a turning point that showed how fragile the boundaries had become, and how easily they could be shattered when personal history was pulled into the battlefield. The exchange didn't just escalate their feud, it redefined it, making clear that no subject, not even family, was entirely safe from the war of words between them. The clash between Barack Obama and Donald Trump that played out on live television was more than a fleeting headline. It was a defining snapshot of their long-running rivalry and the way modern politics has evolved into a space where personal lives and public debates are inseparably intertwined. What began as a calm observation from Obama quickly spiraled into one of Trump's most heated public defenses, laying bare the tension that exists when personal contradictions collide with political narratives. Asterisk, in many ways, the exchange was shocking not because of the content itself. After all, Melania Trump's background has never been a secret, but because of how and where it was delivered. Obama chose a stage where millions were watching, and he made the point with a deliberate calmness that made it sting all the more. Trump's furious eruption showed how deeply he felt the comment crossed a boundary. That contrast, Obama's composure and Trump's explosion, was what elevated the moment into something unforgettable. Asterisk, the incident also highlighted the fragile balance of boundaries in politics. For decades, there has been an understanding that family members, especially spouses who do not actively participate in political debates, should be left out of the fire. Obama's decision to mention Melania challenged that standard, whether intentionally or not, and it forced Americans to reckon with the question of whether personal contradictions should be exempt from public accountability. Trump's defense of his wife was visceral, but it also exposed how much the issue touched his political image, not just his family life. Asterisk, the public reaction mirrored the nation's deep divides. To some, Obama was courageous for stating a truth others avoided, holding Trump accountable by pointing out the irony at the heart of his stance on immigration. To others, it was a low blow, evidence of politics slipping further into a world where nothing and no one is off limits. Trump's supporters embraced his fury as the righteous anger of a husband protecting his wife, while his critics saw it as yet another example of his inability to handle scrutiny when the subject hit too close to home. Asterisk, what remains undeniable is the cultural resonance of the moment. It reignited conversations about immigration, about what it means to champion a cause while living with contradictions, and about the ethics of dragging personal lives into political battlefields. It reminded viewers that politics is no longer just about policy, it is about narratives, contradictions, and the deeply human flaws of those who lead. Asterisk, in the end, the confrontation revealed as much about the country as it did about the two men. It showed how polarized audiences are, how every statement is dissected and reframed to fit competing worldviews, and how the line between personal dignity and political weaponry has become thinner than ever. The rivalry between Trump and Obama has always been marked by intensity, but this episode underscored something more profound. That in today's political arena, no boundary is guaranteed to hold, and when those lines are crossed, the fallout extends far beyond the individual.